Before we get started with this next episode, here is a little recap from last time around, where my focus was to get the inside of the van and engine bay in epoxy primer. I just want to take a moment to say thank you to all the new subscribers. I really appreciate your support and positive comments on this restoration so far. By the end of this episode, the passenger side, rear of the van and driver's side will be in epoxy primer. I will also be fixing some holes in the fiberglass roof caused by the awning brackets and side windows. With all that said, let's get started with this next episode. I started with the passenger side rear quarter. I used an orbital sander with 180 grit sanding discs. The plan was to remove all the cheap primer I had previously sprayed and make sure any rust was removed. The hole in the side of the rear quarter was where previously there was a vent. When we start welding, I want to weld in a patch to cover this hole. I then moved on to the sliding door rail. As you can see, this area will also need some welding. For now, I'm just going to remove the rust and tidy it up the best I can. From just above the wheel arch down is a bit too far gone for my liking, so I won't be sanding down this section. I have bought a new rear arch panel which will help to repair this area. Then over to the shop blaster to take care of some of the trickier areas that I couldn't get into with the orbital sander or by hand. Before I sprayed this panel, we did do some filler work. I decided to use Isopon P38. I haven't done much filler work before, so I was getting a few tips from Dad, who's seen his fair share of restorations over the years. After the filler had gone off, I then block sanded, and then repeated the process but with Dolphin Glaze. This stuff fills pinholes and any minor imperfections. Then it was time to clean the panel before painting. I am using Upol's Raptor Epoxy primer. The reason I'm using an epoxy primer is so we're able to work on a section of the van at a time whilst making sure the metal is protected. If you're interested, I'm using the Clarke PGF14 spray gun. This is a relatively cheap gun, but ideal for all the primer work. As I mentioned in the last episode, I'm not a professional painter, so please go easy on my painting ability. This is my first big project, so there'll be a lot of learning along the way. Before I moved over to the bodywork on the driver's side, I wanted to take care of the holes and scratches caused by the awning brackets and side windows on the passenger side of the roof. I will be blocking off where the windows were at some point. I would much prefer to have a clean white roof on this van. I used a countersink tool to give the holes a bit of a tapered edge. This would give the filler something to stick to. I also went over this side of the fiberglass roof with the orbital sander just to clean it up and make sure I wasn't missing anything I needed to fill. I didn't film this, but I did put some masking tape on the back of all the holes just so the filler wouldn't fall out the other side. The filler I used was this SMC high adhesion white plastic filler. When the filler had gone off, I started sanding. After I'd finished sanding, Dad helped me move the van over so I could start working on the driver's side. Before the van was in this shelter, I had some heavy duty tarpaulins on it to help protect it from the elements. I did also have some plastic duct taped to the roof and over the tarpaulins, so when it rained the water would run off the plastic and over the tarpaulins, not into the gutter rail or van. That was the idea, but it didn't always work very well. Wind would often rip the tarpaulins off the van, and whether the tarpaulins had stayed on or not, rain would always find a way inside. Anyway, the duct tape left some residue which needed cleaning off. I used OB1 multi-surface cleaner. This was really good stuff and worked very well. I then used the orbital sander to go over the roof on the driver's side. Like with the passenger side, just to clean this side of the roof and make sure I'm not missing anywhere I need to fill. Also, like the passenger side, I filled in the holes around the window and then sanded. Next up, I moved on to the driver's side door frame. As you can see, the section around the windscreen is in a really bad way. Also, the front wing, wheel arch and door sill will need replacing. We do already have a good replacement for the windscreen section, which we have cut out from another van. And all those other panels I have just mentioned I have brand new replacements for. And then on to the driver's side. This is quite a big area, so it did take some time. Next I used the shot blaster just to make sure all the rust was removed. Now to the back of the van. I then gave the driver's side one last pass before painting. The rear arch on this side will also be replaced down the line, and all the holes in the side of the van from the mains hookup, vent and water tank will have patches welded in to cover them. I will do the filler work on this side of the van at a later date when we do the holes in the side of the van, the rear arch and door sill. A quick blast over with the airline to chase away as much dust as possible. And a clean with some thinners before painting. At this point I'd already sprayed the driver's side door frame and some of the rear of the van. I did this just so I could give the driver's side of the van my full attention. The main compressor I've been using is very small, it's only 50 litres, and my backup compressor is even smaller, which has been fine up until now for smaller areas, but when I have started to spray a bigger area, like here, I now realise it's just much too small. I kept having to stop and wait for the compressor to fill up. It didn't stop me from getting the job done, but it did slow me down, and it's just highlighted to me that I will need a bigger compressor at some point. Raptor does suggest 2 to 3 coats for their epoxy primer. I've given the van 3 coats in total just to make sure it's nicely covered and protected. Again, waiting for the compressor to fill up, this happened several times. If you're interested, just like last time, I'll put links in the description to products and tools I've used in this episode. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and ring the bell to see what happens next. Also, if you would like to follow me on Instagram, it's Keeping Up with the Campervan.